Hi everyone. I have a really awesome story to share with you. A couple weeks ago, I had been praying about direction in regards to my job and where the Lord was going to take me because the job that I had, the Lord had brought me to, and the only way that I was going to leave it is if God led me out of it. And so I was praying, and the Lord had given me the words go. Weirdest thing, is just the words go. And I'm like, okay. And so I thought that that meant that I was to start planning and applying for jobs and whatnot. And so I started to look for other jobs. And a week after that, my assistant came into my office and told me that he was giving his 2 weeks notice that day. And that, when I asked him if he had another job, he did not. And I said, okay. And he said, the cool thing is that, my wife was telling me, he says, I got my answer yesterday that, my wife was telling me that the Lord had told her that it was time to go. And when I heard those words, I remembered what the Lord had given me. And so I told him my story a little bit, and he says, Josie, he says, when the Lord tells you to go, it means to go. It doesn't mean look for another job, doesn't mean secure another job, it means go. It means that time is of the essence and that it's time to go and that there's a reason for it. He has and has a plan. A lot of us are so scared that, for me, my biggest fear is not thinking that I've heard the Lord right, or just doubting myself. And has been a big struggle in my life is to believe, or to get such a relationship with the Lord that I could finally understand that I was hearing from the Lord, not just myself, that that I could trust what I was getting was of the Lord. And even when you know that, it still plays with you because it's just really scary to trust in what you cannot see. And so he told me to do that, and he led by example. He did that, and he's the only wage earner for his household and has 2 kids. And so a week after that, I decided to follow through with what the Lord had given me. I prayed that morning to make sure that I was right, that I was doing the right thing, because I was still scared out of my mind because I was going to give notice without having a job secured, and I didn't know what that was going to do. That morning, I went into the bank because I had to do a bank wire first before I could go into the office. And all the ladies there, they're all friends with me. And I told the one lady, I said, you're not going to be very happy with me. And she goes, why? And I said, well, because I'm giving my 2 weeks notice today. And she asked me, why? And I started to cry, and I told her, what the Lord had given me, and that the Lord had said that it was time to go and that I didn't have a job. And she came over and she sat next to me and she said, Josie, she said, what's funny is it's really ironic that you tell me that, because this morning on my way to work, I heard Rick Warren. He was giving a speech and he said, delayed obedience is disobedience. And I was like, that's a good one. And she says, if God has asked you to go, he obviously has a plan and has something bigger waiting for you, and you need to trust that. And so I left there with enough courage that when I got into my work, that I gave my notice within 10 minutes of being there. That was Wednesday the 14th. And Wednesday is our prayer group day. And I was so grateful because by the time I left work, I was shaking like a leaf and thinking, man, did I do the right thing? I was just restless, and so I get to prayer group. It's after 6:30, and so they were getting pretty close to wrapping it up, to start praying and everything. But Paul let me say what I needed, and I told everybody that I had given notice, at my job, that but I didn't have a job to go to. I explained to them why, that the Lord had asked me to go, and so in faith I gave my notice and was just going to walk by faith. No matter how hard it was, I was going to do what the Lord had asked me to do. And bless their heart, each and every one of them surrounded me and prayed for me that night, and encouraged me. And, Dave Stout, I remember his prayer because he says, God, let this be one of her greatest testimonies that she has, let it be an example. And those words were profound, because my hope is when I am obedient to the Lord, that something good comes of it for others, and that God can be glorified in my walk. It's not about me and what I get from it, but it's about what God is after in me. And for my life, I have always been able to count on these hands, to earn the money, to do everything. You know, to walk by faith is extremely hard. It's not easy and very scary. And the reason it's scary is because I think that because so many people in our life has disappointed us that we think God's going to do the same thing. We think God's going to let us down. And so it's scary for us to walk out in faith and believe that he will do what he says he's going to do, and is who he says he is. It just is extremely hard to put faith in something we cannot see. And so for me to step out and give my notice without having a job was huge, because I have always made sure that I had something secured before I left a job. But, it doesn't take much faith to leave a job when you have a job. It takes faith to leave a job when you don't have one. And I believe that God was after something in me, and that was, okay, Josie, you've given me your will. Now, can you trust me with your life? And all of it, that he will provide. He says, do not worry what you shall eat. Do not worry about tomorrow. Do not worry about those things. And by stepping out in faith, you are literally believing that word that the Lord will provide for you, especially if he's the one directing you. And so, it's a huge thing. And so that night, it was big for all of us, because it was just shock for myself. But that night, and when I left from the prayer group and whatnot, I left with peace. The next day, I still had peace. That was Thursday. Well, Thursday night, I wrote an email to one of the CPAs that I've worked the last 2 years with, for the company that I've been working for. And I was going to ask for a letter of recommendation. And so I did. I told him that I had left my job, that I had given my 2 weeks notice, but I didn't have a job, and asked if I could get a letter of recommendation from him. So the next morning, I get several emails and a couple phone calls from this CPA, and he finally gets me on the phone, and he says, hey, can you be here in an hour? And I'm like, how about an hour and a half? And so he says, good, just be here. And he says, just be yourself. And so I went in to be interviewed, and I'm still in shock, but I interviewed with him and the owner of the CPA firm. And unbeknownst to me, one of their largest clients had been looking for a particular person to help assist the main lady of this company have some relief. They needed to be able to train another person to be able to do what she could do so she could have a vacation. She'd been there for 17 years. But they were needing somebody with a quiet character, one that was honest, one that was humble. I didn't know this. But anyhow, the owner of the CPA firm asked me to just explain my history and whatnot. And I just told him a little bit about myself and what I did, and where I'd been, what jobs I had done and whatnot, normal interview. And he gets to the end of it, and he says, you are the person we have been looking for, and this is why. He says, you didn't come in here and talk yourself up. He said, you come off as very genuine, very, honest and sincere. You have a sincere desire to help. You just come off as a very good person. And he said, all the other people that we had thought, might be a good fit, they were overqualified, they were arrogant, or, they talked themselves up. And he said, you didn't. He said, you come off as very humble, and you didn't brag about yourself. And I'm just thinking to myself, this is just surreal. This is weird, but this is surreal. But this company that they have is their largest client. And man, all I did was ask for a letter of recommendation. I did not apply for this job, but all of a sudden I have a job. The pay is no less than what I make now. It's closer to home. It's within 10 minutes of home. It's a regular 8 to 5 Monday through Friday job. And I'm still awestruck, because if I hadn't worked for the company that I worked for, that I'm coming from, I wouldn't have been able to have this job. If I hadn't had the obedience to the Lord, I wouldn't have been able to have this job. If I hadn't if I hadn't given notice when I did, the time was of the essence. And I learned that, if I hadn't listened, I may not have what I have right now. But because I listened, God was able to show up and show me who He is. God is who He says He is. He will do what He says He will do. When He says that He will provide for you, He will provide for you. And the hardest thing in my life, and I'm just going to say this because the hardest thing in my life has been putting my life in God's hand. The biggest thing was putting my heart in His hand because, it's just scary. So this time I entrusted the Lord with my life and what was ahead of me, because I have, in this last year and a half, grown closer to the Lord than I've ever, as Pastor Paul says, study, do, teach. I've been studying the Word for the last year and a half, more so than I ever have. I've been praying more than I've ever prayed in my life. And this time I did what the Word says to do, which is to be obedient, to listen to the Lord, have Christ-like character, all those things. I would not be having this job if I had not been obedient, if I had not had the characteristics that I have, which I believe are walking as an example of a Christian. If I say I'm a Christian, I act like a Christian for myself, I just am saying that, I am accountable to the Lord. Everything that I do is as unto the Lord. That's what the Word says. But if I hadn't been like that, I wouldn't be having this job. And, we're all at different levels, and God reaches us at whatever level we are at and is able to bring us out of whatever we're at. I have just come to the place where I finally said, okay, God, I trust you. I trust you with everything. It doesn't mean I just trust you with this one little thing over here, but not over here. No, I put my life entirely in His hands, and He showed up. And so if I could, say anything to each and every one of you, it is trust that the Lord has a plan for you, and that your story has value to somebody, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done. If God has called you out of it, He's going to use your story to bless another person, to bring another person to Christ. Whatever it may be, your story has value. And so I shared my story with you, just one of them, so I could encourage somebody in their faith walk with the Lord. If God is asking you to do something, and you know it because He's given it to you several times in prayer, but you don't trust it, I'm asking you today to finally put your trust and faith in the Lord, because He will meet you. He will meet your needs. He will do what He says He's going to do, and He will show up. So I wanted to share with you, because I believe sharing our stories helps others, with their faith walk. And I hope that I've blessed somebody, and I want to say thank you to everybody who was in the prayer group that prayed for me, each and every one of you that touched my heart and gave me the courage to be where I'm standing today. And so I want to thank the Geigers, the Stouts, Janine, Pam, Linda, everybody that was there that night. And yes, Pastor Paul, I know that I shocked you, but this was a good thing, and I believe it was a faith builder for each and every one of us that has been in that prayer group, to see God's hand move in somebody's life. And what just blows my mind is that it took 2 days, just 2 days. I stepped out in faith, and the Lord answered within 2 days. Now, does it happen like that all the time? I don't know, but I'm telling you what, I feel blessed beyond measure, and my cup runneth over, And so I want that for others. I want to see others be happy and to be blessed by the Lord, but He can't bless us until we walk out in faith, step out in faith, and trust Him. He wants to bless us, but we've got to take that step, that first step. Faith without works is dead, God says. And so I'm encouraging somebody today, or each and every one of you today, to step out in faith and trust the Lord with all your heart, and He will meet you. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope I've blessed all of you today. Thank you.